GUOIDJAH as KLOAREG.
Smileam COOIDJAGH Goud sin Gold Tayagrish Claare na Gael. My name is Robert CARJYN Robert a COOIDJAGH.
Have you ever had tell about Bobby Bob?
And in this bilingual programme you'll hear part of it in the English language as Nishu Clash and CAARJYN, and you'll hear part of it in the Manx Gaelic, Chinnionamera, the mother tongue of Ellen Vanning, the Isle of Man. As Banachta and Jurish, in 1911, an American scholar, W.Y. Evans Wentz, Walter Yealing, the W.Y. stood for Walter Yealing Evans Wentz, compiled a book which he called The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries. He had correspondents in all the countries, and in respect to the Isle of Man, his correspondent was Sophia Morrison, although she also drew on the work of others, as we'll hear this time. Mina Harker cor Ernadenia Ginulu, Mavissa Rahagan Octavalia Chochle, Huishas the way creature a Count Dracula, Shar an ear Versunach Morvi, the Jinnad Marroo, as es Corish a corp Marrowek de Livre and Animec. Well, Chanel Jonathan Harker Shiga Machion Breera Masen. Well, Phil's quite right. It's been a great week of Unchroniac, and Breton mother and daughter BRIGITTE and KATELL KLOAREG sang for us in Breton, French, Welsh, English and Italian as part of it. Now here's a French text that they sing about Pauvre marin. Tashu geestjach ris radio vanning, stashu nanashun, viscoller skeliene vai dulish, Ellen Vanning.
Marin revient de guerre, oui, de guerre. Marin revient de guerre, oui, revient de guerre. Tout mal chaussé, tout mal vêtu, pauvre marin, d'où reviens-tu? Oui, tout mal vêtu. Marin, d'où reviens-tu? Madame, je reviens de guerre, oui, de guerre. Madame, je reviens de guerre, oui, je reviens de guerre. Qu'on apporte ici du vin blanc, que le marin boive en passant. Oui, de bon vin blanc, qu'il boive en passant. Marin se mit à boire, oui, à boire. Marin se mit à boire, oui, se mit à boire. Se mit à boire et à chanter, et la belle hôtesse a pleuré. Oui, lui a chanté, et elle a pleuré. Dites-moi la belle hôtesse, oui, l'hôtesse. Dites-moi la belle hôtesse, oui, la belle hôtesse. Regrettez-vous votre vin blanc que le marin boit en passant? Oui, votre vin blanc qu'il boit en passant. C'est pas mon vin que je regrette, non, pas mon vin. C'est pas mon vin que je regrette, non, que je regrette, mais bien la mort de mon mari. Monsieur, vous ressemblez à lui. Oui, mon mari, vous ressemblez à lui. Dites-moi la belle hôtesse, oui, l'hôtesse. Dites-moi la belle hôtesse, oui, la belle hôtesse. Vous aviez de lui 3 enfants, vous en avez 4 à présent. Oui, 3 enfants et 4 à présent. On m'a donné de ces nouvelles, oui, des nouvelles. On m'a donné de ces nouvelles, oui, de ces nouvelles. Qu'il était mort et enterré, et je me suis remariée. Mort et enterré, et moi remariée. Marin vide son verre, oui, son verre. Marin vide son verre, oui, vide son verre. Sans remercier tout en pleurant, s'en retourne à son bâtiment. Oui, tout en pleurant à son bâtiment. Oui, tout en pleurant à son bâtiment.
A French text, Pauvre marin, set by Breton singer BRIGITTE KLOAREG to a tune that was collected in the British Isles, in fact, sung there by BRIGITTE and her daughter KATELL. More from them later on. Now, section 1 of W.Y. Evans Wentz's book, The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries, is called The Living Fairy Faith, and he devotes his second chapter to the taking of evidence, and he goes round the 6 Celtic countries. And in part 4 we find In the Isle of Man. Introduction by Sophia Morrison, on Secretary of the Manx Language Society, and this is the opening of her introduction, writing in 1910. The Manx hierarchy of fairy beings, she writes, people hills and glens, caves and rivers, mounds and roads, and their name is legion. Apparently there's not a place in the island but has its fairy legend. Sir Walter Scott said that, so here she's quoting from Sir Walter, the Isle of Man, beyond all other places in Britain, was a peculiar dispository of the fairy traditions, which, on the island being conquered by the Norse, became in all probability checkered with those of Scandinavia, from a source peculiar and more direct than that by which they reached Scotland and England. So that's the quote that she gives from Sir Walter Scott. To Mina Harker co freigert and dunne chisholm Jonathan, vel eschen de yno lunius, gorish na firelia. O, me vind he de grey. De bege de wel feme mer guller marroo ljorish lauwer bi, lieg de wel ljorish lau eggesen as de grey share egge arm. Maar Van Helsing, genelmien Njeroed, een muggened, ons kush Lucy Bach ersen voor graag. Rennie square by as jurgige de bew as Rennie Claare reik. Ersen as van KAARJYN de CAARJYN. Ma wissen tre shentjet rish, tammy shira eriw, de yno cunyon man rajay, ons beim o unye shesha, de nean lau graach eggesen vi, ren ligge semi, vain smag aglach besorm. Rish tammy brera henkorea hienach en alu. Ren benaisje haak munga, de firnjach rennie munga, as les jasnu de relief, renne lie lie back as dorty, as nish goer lie maar rauw, nach naiden duwj a rood arach. Now this is a song in Irish about little Nora, Nora bheag, and her various likes.
Bachelor Nora, Patty Rose, just use up the run chimba. You see me Nora, 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 go see me still my guy. You see me Nora, still my story, time she don't cry. Degas briskis fannig og tolga laia. Jeg simmer Nora, 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 jeg simmer stum og graia. Jeg simmer Nora, stum og står in tam ikke dom den graia. Nora vekkar og torer og vi med kollegari. Jeg skrev i jaget teinen kjenne piver og bjagga savaldi. Jeg simmer Nora, 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 jeg simmer stum og graia. Jeg simmer Nora, stum og står in tam ikke dom den graia. Jeg simmer Nora, Nora, Nora,
An archive recording by Irish band EMMET SPICELAND, a song in Irish, Nora bheag. For the jig and tray, sure, ma visse chitarach, the bew as the new yerkit, as ons lieder chush geneidend you call trayer be, ons ginno imid, Jane Gael. Eg lieder grij voor die de be machine, genee, ma vissen tray chitarach, bim de vier. Ons kiaull grishne noij ne njajau. Jiri elje, henkie de wei fietrom kushach. Gauws door de show. Genee sledden femoile as immertjach grishne elje. Ach, tam I giri shuish de jinnu unre der mahan, ma vishu arltach. Renshin ulju cordeel. Ach, geloor peger be, gerau fame lord. Tammy giri shu, de jij machen shirwees van onlokkende merju. Ons show wie erne brisjestjach joris saag houden as de dunje cheshek. As ish, goile lauwege ons shenek, renni kummeli erskinne krias, haier. Signed you, jij machi skin laenjach. Now, Sophia Morrison continues in her own words again now. A good Manxman, however, doesn't speak of fairies. The word fetish, a corruption of the English, didn't exist in the island 150 years ago. He talks of the lil people, Munjavega, or in a more familiar mood of themselves, and of lil boys, Gillianvega, or lil fellas. In contradistinction to mortals, he calls them middle-world men, for they're believed to dwell in a world of their own, being neither good enough for heaven nor bad enough for hell. At the present moment, not to mention she was writing this September 1910, in fact, for W.Y. Evans Wentz to publish the following year, at the present moment almost all the older Manx peasants hold to this belief in fairies quite firmly, but with a certain dread of them. And, to my knowledge, she writes, 2 old ladies of the better class yet leave out cakes and water for the fairies every night. So there we are, class is important as well. We've got peasants and better class here. Welsh band MABON with a young Jamie Smith playing his accordion there, probably not much older than his son Frank is now. And Jamie and Frank played some absolutely cracking music throughout in CAARJYN Stasiwn yn asiwn ta radio banning as stasiwn yn asiwn sheet Claare and Gael was for CAARJYN COOIDJAGH Marin Peen Robert Couldin Carswell Robert a Corslach.
Did the ever hear tell of old Bobby Bob?
For the CAARJYN na Claare Shorish for Shacht and Jean look Jiggle a Creela and Kiark Joris Golgus and a dagger radio banning as Rai Agert. Ten CAARJYN Yes more podcast was getting nasty in a dagger radio banning the Trud Kiark and podcast Elia Apple Podcasts, Amazon Audible, Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, na Alexa. The following story, writes Sophia Morrison, illustrative of the belief, was told to me by Bill Clark. And here she tells the story. Once, while I was fishing from a ledge of rocks that runs out into the sea at Lagnakillia, a dense grey mist began to approach the land, and I thought I'd best make for home while the footpath above the rocks was visible. When getting my things together, I heard what sounded like a lot of children coming out of school. I lifted my head, and behold ye, there was a fleet of fairy boats each side of the rock. Their riding lights were shining like little stars, and I heard one of the lilfellas shout, "Chrechen bach as eirish brach, scadan de KLOAREG and wunja sail shaw, KATELL bheag ein." Poor times and dirty weather, and herring enough at the people of this world, nothing at us. Then they dropped off and went to Gate of the Flitters. Willie the Fairy, as he's called, she goes on, who lives at Renas, says he often hears the fairies singing and playing up the glen o' nights. Claare be vis an Irish gin stead aglach show the rithin, be I millisha dunolju. Not the cuse gin. Tammy tresh gel must move in, the gin us liai, sonesh, be an chore eds vis suchunion the brech, Claare be bestagerd. Oh, maveen, René pligel, ta best for the ward. Chanel, doorty, as ish kummel soos lau rawi. Tammy na stuna ons bes eg a tresh shaw, na de berg trimmed ice and oer na leitrom arm. Oh, me ven jesje wel arm, jai, doorty, rosh me ven merenny gold, gameleshel, rosh merenny gold toecht. Jinnach e CAARJYN me, maar ren je jesje, va olju, maar doorty. As gauw toecht jai trevi en jin de werlu al jaar. Krenacht fodem, Krenacht voor die perger bij, korkunte jen riert kwechen, an achtveeg, ho trom gushak, ho gromach, ho traai, ho aglach, as mer is shen, ho millish. Now, speaking of millish, CAARJYN COOIDJAGH sang a lovely set in St. German's Cathedral yesterday afternoon, and this is one of the songs they sang.
Kan green the rail and knees and saws you down to Genel side. Ye billy fina smona through my shoulder, ye and kunta smoo. Molly G. Merham's vanity and Luden by ledger as a fry. Tax in as Dakkarel to goal as soul as bringing on. The beth and stachel naco call and uji shoge lost and sail and Nora's get the mush Vicky o souches dash and nish Molly G. Merham's vanity and Lund by legend has a fry Tax in as Dakkarel to goal as soul as bringing on. Oh, here's you go and bless your hood, Grenactium's the stronger hood, Matangle to ye cool and I'll machine to surely Sergeant Gael. Molly G. Merham's vanity and Lund by legend has a fry, that's in as Dakkarel, the goal is soul is free and on. Up mat and green for module still. Desn't a dull and dun and go. Asian new job trending there, she showed the genuine there. Mulgi Barons vanity and young Valager has a fry. Dark sinners that can the goal soul is brilliant on. Oh, warrior and a clergy Gael, the heaven nail and me failure. Tugus a look to Nurshevine, a shawl a shash the guest must way. Mulgi Barons vanity and young Valager has a fry. Dark sinners that can the goal soul is brilliant on. Mulgi Barons vanity and young Valager has a fry. Dark sinners that can the goal soul is brilliant on.
CAARJYN COOIDJAGH, I mentioned those words were written by Bishop Samuel Rutter. No, I mentioned they were singing at the cathedral, so it was appropriate that they were written by Bishop Samuel Rutter, is what I was struggling to say. Although, of course, that cathedral is far after Samuel Rutter's time. More from CAARJYN COOIDJAGH later as well. Ver du chelach. Nach wat fagen weg ach kamarisch je firnis sharu ons weg kajerich na enjachtach, courage the lies a kriege, de beche a nagen a podden beg shen, de CAARJYN graiach firniach, va gluna magiet de wenser siech ne trimshach shen. Na glaasjen jeaned mai correi a dunje sheshe, gouds, les shienen, go brish, les enjachten, de rawe de menig ersen furgach, renne ljai maach en shirweis njau krampelen, as onlukken a merju. Nodum Claare. Te vogelen, as me gerei verleel me. Wie kjaart zich hielek? Squech maar beulju sledden, squech maar beulju sledden as kaadjens maar nee jean de wei, voor die eer dingen ren genachten en troonjaartel legge treie heen, renne geurjige in de moer, as wij jean a rauwe taastig, ren saljige maken woelje, wat chit der benaisje hage, wij surstes en anem, geledden de wie grijs, de ferrer biegen, as we shin goel aalrosh. Now, Sophia Morrison has introduced us to Willie the Fairy, and she says of him, I've heard his I've heard his airs which he said he'd thus learned from the Lill people. And here also she has a footnote in which she tells us Willie the Fairy, otherwise known as William Kane. And he's also referred to by another of her contributors, John Nelson, who mentions that he'd heard Willie the Fairy play one of these fairy tunes at one of our Manx entertainments in Peel. Now back to Sophia Morrison's text here. She writes, again, there's a belief that at Keelmurra, Mary's church near Glen May, a little old woman in a red cloak is sometimes seen coming over the mountain towards the keel, ringing a bell, just about the hour when church service begins. Keelmurra, she says, is one of the early little Celtic cells, probably of the 6th century, of which nothing remains but the foundations. And, she says, the following prayer surviving to our own epoch, is most interesting, and we'll come to that anon. Now, in our Thursday evening presentation, Imbach and Kelchach, the Celtic Seasons, Cornish singer Richard TRETHEWEY and the Rowan Tree sang about bringing the harvest home.
First thing in the morning, when the dew still crowns the grass, we'll send the chiel to cut the ferns and carry them in her arms, to bring the harvest home, bring the harvest home. The people will come to gather the plums and bring the harvest home. The finest trees in Cornwall along the river stand, the key plums of Cowlands and Coombe where water meets the land. The boughs hang overburdened where blossom once did grow. They'll come to shake the trees into the boats that wait below. bring the harvest home. The people will come to gather the plums and bring the harvest home. When the boats are laden and the orchards all lie bare, we'll take the plums into the house to sort and count them there. In casts of 5 we'll count them as the light is fading now. 21 casts for 100 of plums from the deep and bosky far. Bring the harvest home, bring the harvest home. The people will come to gather the plums and bring the harvest home. We'll line the baskets with the ferns to keep the plums from harm, and with songs and music through the night, bring the harvest home, bring the harvest home. The people will come to gather the plums and bring the harvest home. Bring the harvest home, bring the harvest home. The people will come to gather the plums and bring the harvest home. Bring the harvest home, bring the harvest home. The people will come to gather the plums and bring the harvest home.
A track from Richard TRETHEWEY's recently released album Two Halves, and that was Bringing the Harvest Home, which was part, as I say, of DUNCAN CHISHOLM, the Celtic Seasons, our Thursday evening presentation, which really was, well, everybody said how good it was. It really, you definitely had to be there. Now, of this prayer that Sophia Morrison is about to tell us, she writes that it shows, in fact, pure paganism, and we may judge from it that the ancient Manx people regarded Manannán, the great Tuatha god, in his true nature as a spiritual being, a lord of the sea, and as belonging to the complex fairy hierarchy. This prayer was told to me by a Manx woman nearly 100 years old who is still living. Remember, this is 1910. Substituting St. Patrick's name for Manannán's. Manannán bheag macalir fair banny an elian. Banny sin as nin meda, got my gol mag, as chitsjach na share, les bioe as marroo sabeda. Little Manannán, son of Lear, who blessed our island, bless us and our boat, well going out and better coming in, with living, that's the crew, and dead, that's dead fish in the boat. Lior Jonathan Harker, and Chwegl jeg Jedafauer Varner. Deg sin cross-charing, Mora and na le jeg, as Rengshin Paris and Unni, as Gaushin na Inadan Rechit en son trein tavi a jaar. Washin trailt fain le as fudna he, as Henkshin de saw mus Quegger a chlag. Hain charn godalmingus tie a consul, de yen rout Shelgrammer jitter a hon, Gouds henk na Fireliagin gus a tie shaw, and Odessus. For the en ridden tacher sa journeach, va mishro gian de roshin the ball shaw, de ve burrichman in gyon. Deravis as Arena Catherine Chitsjach sa furt, ga be simmem bheag sa cledden tail. Puis the G to Mina mai, as they gian the valley chit the vein astroja, tan de chit a rashi. Te cadla the menic, fine journey vin a cadla bunus a cledden tray. Ach, Rá siar na gréine an lai gréine, tí ledden rúis as cór Gael, as té jit de bheith cleachta ag Van Helsing, de chorí fób hypnosis ag liad na trein. Well, yesterday evening, Saturday the 27th, we celebrated the launch of the Katie Lawrence Tune Collection, published with the support of Culture Vannin, and Katie and friends treated us to an absolutely brilliant set of really wonderful playing. And then we heard her playing in a slightly sparser setting than we heard her last night, some of her own tunes. Siodiw stasiwn yn asiwn radio fanning as ag y tre ton, sé Claare na Gael wisgol sgéliamach. Mish, Robert Gutting Carswell, Robert a Carslach.
Ever heard tell of our Bobby Bob?
Ag y toiacht for fémer bit de Abe, as ve ersen cor immedi cawrach yn Harry. Ach, nish, te gien de valley liga les chalirach, mor de bechi a cleachteg, a scone wel fémer imiach erbij. Te gien de wel poerege ag na trein lie sio, ach de giria, as ten a smullion ag bailach de. Te de kinjach braiach gien a fuddy fagen as clashen. Te ko fregert en chider, weg, sdorrige wisulju. As risha fodem clashen na tonnen, lianten rishalung, as an ustje raisha. Te carmesh as tedden, chonna, as te kroon as sladden gisterny. Strashet en rie, fodem clashen die ons neerigen, as ten boeg kiaull jadiet gesh. Scronnelwee, de rauwe Zarina Catherine fos erachien, as seidige redek as barna. Ten charn godalming Carter jit back, for keertjel gramanega, fair dach lei, near as gauschen toicht. From the particular, Sophia Morrison moves on now to the general view. It seems to me that no one of the various theories so far advanced accounts in itself for the fairy faith. There's always a missing factor, an unknown quantity which has yet to be discovered. No doubt the pygmy theory explains a good deal. Now, the pygmy theory was something put forward by David McRitchie, 1851 to 1925, a Scottish folklorist and antiquarian. He proposed that stories of fairies originated in a historical pygmy, dwarf or short-sized aboriginal race that lived in Neolithic Britain, or even earlier than the Neolithic time, before Celts and other groups arrived. Sophia Morrison suggests that this theory may explain a good deal. In some countries, she says, a tradition has been handed down of the times when there were races of diminutive men in existence, beings so small that their tiny hands could have used the flint arrowheads and scrapers, which are like toys to us. Well, she has a caveat here, and we'll see how she tempers that thought next. This is another song that was performed at the Thursday evening Celtic Seasons when CAARJYN COOIDJAGH sang about Kiark, Catreeney, marroo.
Kiark, Catreeney, marroo, oh, Kiark, Catreeney, marroo. Kiark, Catreeney, marroo, oh, Kiark, Catreeney, marroo. Catreeney, marroo, Catreeney, marroo, oh, Kiark, Catreeney, marroo. Kiark, Catreeney, marroo. Kiark, Catreeney, marroo. Gaus a Kionas, gaus a Cousinas, Bernadine von Talou. Kiark, Catreeney, marroo, Catreeney, marroo, Catreeney, marroo, Catreeney, gaus a Kionas, gaus a Cousinas, Bernadine von gaus a Kionas, gaus a Cousinas, Bernadine von Talou. Kiark, Catreeney, marroo, Kiark, Catreeney, marroo. Kiark, Catreeney, marroo, Kiark, Catreeney, Kiark, Catreeney, Kiark, Catreeney, marroo, Kiark, Catreeney, marroo. Kiark, Catreeney, marroo, Kiark, Catreeney, marroo. Gaus a Kionas, gaus a Cousinas, Bernadine von Talou. Kiark, Catreeney, marroo, Catreeney, marroo, Catreeney, marroo, Catreeney, gaus a Kionas, gaus a Cousinas, Bernadine von gaus a Kionas, gaus a Cousinas, Bernadine von Talou.
A seasonal song by CAARJYN COOIDJAGH that fitted into our look at Caoil na Bliana, the Wheel of the Year, on Thursday evening. Well, despite the pygmy theory, Sophia Morrison says, no such tradition exists at the present day in the Isle of Man, but one might have filtered down from the far-off ages and become innate in the folk memory, and now unknown to the Manx peasant may possibly suggest to his mind the troops of little people in the shadowy glen or on the lonely mountainside. Again, the rustling of the leaves or the sough of the wind may be heard by the peasant as strange and mysterious voices, or the trembling shadow of a bush may appear to him as an unearthly being. Natural facts, explainable by modern science, may easily remain dark mysteries to those who live quiet lives close to nature, far from sophisticated towns, and whose few years of schooling have left the depths of their being undisturbed, only, as it were, ruffling the shallows. But, she says, this is not enough. Even let it be granted that 9 out of every 10 cases of experiences with fairies can be analysed and explained away. There remains the 10th. For Olju na Chelgram and Coran on Chaachdrach, Novel Tourustel Jane Zarina Catherine Rei Currit de Coloch Lloyd vai Boller B. Ve Reichit Egger, Rosh Merenshin Vergeel Lunning, the Jintach Egger, Dachleik or Chaachdrach de Berg Tourustel Machion along. Yenach get an Chaachdrach man a rau Tourustel Machionek, de Berg Shigger de rau Aragul Frail Kionelia streng Chelgraf. Gaushin Jenair as Heishin de Leid de Morgen. Lene Verach nimmich vagen al jas Chonsel, as de regen me visjenabel Karsne boer de long Golias Tirashen. De Van Helsing grey, de bien Kain de Karsne boer de long eder irine grenia as een laigrenia. Hier me vis Count Gael Ersen na komme J. Kratniag, genodigol herish en ostje rai J. Jaun heen, as me saw genodig for Gael and long. Now we hear Brigitte and KATELL KLOAREG again. This time they're joined by the fiddle of their friend Una Léon in this song in Breton.
En anglais het bonnet da ru la ri drau drau la ri bedi bedau. En anglais het bonnet da ru la ri drau drau la ri bedi bedau. En anglais het bonnet da ru o de toilet baza pouldu. O de toilet baza pouldu. Baza pouldu o de toilet la ri drau drau la ri bedi bedau. Baza pouldu o de toilet la lari drau drau lari bedi bedau bar da pouldu ores doaret ver ya wanko de sleret ver ya wanko de sleret ver ya wanka gonnorion lari drau drau lari bedi bedau ver ya wanka gonnorion lari drau drau lari bedi bedau ver ya wanka gonnorion dagas gate do bâtiment dagas gante do bâtiment. Zigga zigga zig, lari day tula, zigga zigga za. Lari day tula, zigga zigga zig, lari day tula, zigga zigga za. Med ar plahik se na wele, med ar plahik se na wele. Med ar plahik se a wele, med ar plahik se a wele. A hapite na hulle ne, lari day tula, zigga zigga zig, lari day tula, zigga zigga za. Lari day tula, zigga zigga zig, lari day tula. Zigga zigga za. Klare tweeden plahikje wang, klare tweeden plahikje wang. Klare tweeden plahikje wang, klare tweeden plahikje wang. Koos dapper hage wil is dan klari day tula, zigga zigga zig, klari day tula, zigga zigga za. Klari day tula, zigga zigga zig, klari day tula, zigga zigga za. Marivoniga wele, ja marivoniga wele. Marivoniga wele, marivoniga wele. Avartolo de da warze, lari day tula, zigga zigga zig, lari day tula, zigga zigga za. Lari day tula, zigga zigga zig, lari day tula, zigga zigga za. Me marivoniga gone, me marivoniga gone. Marivoniga gone, ja marivoniga gone. Avartolo de da guske, lari day tula, zigga zigga zig, lari day tula, zigga zigga za. Lari day tula, zigga zigga zig, lari day tula, zigga zigga za. Darpem var nu gena visdu, darpem var nu gena visdu. Darpem var nu gena visdu, darpem var nu gena visdu. Disken marivon bar pouldu, lari day tula, zigga zigga zig, lari day tula, zigga zigga za. Lari day tula, zigga zigga zig, lari day tula, zigga zigga za. Lari day tula, zigga zigga zig, lari day tula, zigga zigga za. Lari day tula, zigga zigga zig, lari day tula, zigga zigga za. Lari day tu, zigga zigga zig, lari day tu, zigga zigga za. Lari day tu, zigga zigga zig, lari day tu, zigga zigga za.
Marivonig ar pouldu, a song in Breton by Brigitte and KATELL KLOAREG, and they were joined by the fiddle of Una Leon in the trio Mara. An ó nach leos de cach leg as Cumadania gin chit 4 hours, a spark the lay de Balligiri shan a shen, signed tannacht and sechistja. Mabisse shing and the hit boord lug irina grenia, beer for an eigne ein. Son fodmuch fosler kistja, as ginu shigger benten day. Morenshin lesh Lucy Bach, rosh mabisse duster. Chagin and eigne behind benten de kuna lesh monna. In this 10th case, says Sophia Morrison, one is obliged to admit that there is something at work which we don't understand, some force in play which as yet we know not. In spite of ourselves, we feel there's powers that's in. As told you by Shaw, a nachiet, but that's it for this time. Well, last night, CAARJYN finished off with the superb music making of Scottish musicians Duncan Chisholm on fiddle, Hamish Napier on piano and keyboards, and Ross Ainsley on whistle that we can hear playing now, all co-writers of the album Black Coolin'. Well, stand by for 2 hours of the best chill-out music for your Sunday evening, this week with Christy DeHaven. And then at 9 o'clock, Judith Lay presents Sundown. Shene, Mava Migray, Son and Cheer Show. And so until the next time then, this is Robert Coutinho Carswell, Robert de CAARJYN,
Old Bobby Bob,
wishing you a very good night. Evi Machrieru, as Orserlier, as Mayirian shared you will you.